Hello everyone and welcome back to Color Scholar. This is part 2 of the two-part video series focusing on adjustment layers and layer mask. In the previous video, we talked about adjustment layers and their types and how we can use each one of them to our images. In this video, we will see what layer masks are and how we can use them to achieve our creative vision. So let's get started. Layer masks are a fundamental tool in image manipulation. They are a very important part of Photoshop tools that gives us the ability to hide and reveal parts of layer without having to delete them. Now we will see how we can use layer mask when working with adjustment layers in order to do custom edits. So what are layer masks? If the term layer mask is confusing you, replace the word mask with transparency, because that's what layer mask does. It allows you to control a layer's transparency level. Now you may be thinking, but I can control the transparency level with opacity option. And yes, you certainly can. The opacity option in the top right corner of the layers palette also allows you to control a layer's transparency. But here's the difference. The opacity option changes the transparency level of the entire layer at once. If you lower the opacity, let's say 50%, you will be lowering 50% transparency of the entire layer. That may be fine for some situations, but if you want only a part of the layer transparent and not the whole, then layer mask becomes handy. So let's go over the basics of layer mask. Layer mask is represented by the square right here, and when you create an adjustment layer, any one among the 16 of them, a layer mask will be applied for you. So within layer mask, there are three colors that we can use: black, white and gray. Anything in white means we are adding to that edit, and anything in black means we are removing it. But we can also use gray to bring in a certain percentage of that edit based on how dark that gray color is. So when you apply your edits, then you can use layer mask and your brushes to paint on with black to remove and white to add back the edit. So if I take my brush from the tools panel, or if you press B on the keyboard, your brush will be selected. And since I have applied a black and white adjustment to the whole image with my foreground color black, if I paint on the car, I will be removing the black and white effect from the car. And if I want to bring back my edit, I should make my foreground color as white, and I can do that by pressing X on the keyboard. That will toggle between the foreground and background color, and as I press X, my foreground color is white, and now if I paint over the car again, you can see my edit is coming back, and in the mask you can see previously it was black, and after the painting the mask has become completely white. So by default, when you create an adjustment layer or add a layer mask, your background and foreground colors will change to black and white. Let's delete this adjustment layer for once. Let's change the colors of foreground and background. And now if I apply an adjustment layer, you can see the foreground and background colors has changed to black and white. And the next thing is, simply you need to select your brush tool like I said before, or B is the shortcut, and you can paint on black to remove the edit. And if your foreground color is white, just press X, it will become black. And now you can simply paint on the areas where you don't want to edit. And if you want to bring back your edit, press X again, make your foreground color white and paint again. But you need to make sure in your layers panel the layer mask is selected, which is indicated by this little icon over this area. And one more thing, if your foreground and background colors are different and you want to revert them back to default, that is black and white, if you press D on your keyboard, your background and foreground colors will be white and black. Your foreground is black and your background is white. So layer mask gives us the precision and control over where we want our edits being applied. But just remember, white adds and black removes. So now let's bring the things that we learned into action. Here I've got an image of a parrot, and we are going to edit this image such that only parrot will remain in color and everything else will be black and white. For that I'm going to use a black and white adjustment layer, and now the whole image is black and white. I'm not going to worry about color channels right now because this is just a basic edit and we are learning here about layer masks. You can zoom into the canvas by pressing Ctrl++ sign on Windows and Command++ sign on Mac, and if you want to zoom out you can press Ctrl+- sign on Windows and Command+- sign on Mac. Now I've got my brush tool selected, and you can change the size of your brush by pressing left square bracket key to decrease the size of the brush and right square bracket key to increase the size of the brush. Now with my brush tool selected and my foreground color as black, if I press X on the keyboard my foreground color will be black. I'm just going to paint around the parrot to bring back the colors, as I am removing the edit from the parrot only. While painting on the parrot, you can see I've got some colors outside right around the beak of the parrot, and I can get rid of these colors. If I press X on my keyboard, my foreground color will be white, and if I just paint around this excess area, I can remove those colors because I am bringing back my edit that is black and white. So I'll just go ahead and paint this parrot with color. So I have completed painting around the parrot and I have isolated the parrot from the background, and this is the final result. Now we can also work with the opacity of the layer mask. If I decrease the opacity, you can see some color showing up in the rest of the image, giving kind of a vintage look, but the bird has remained completely in color, so you can even bring back the colors and give it some kind of effect. Just a quick tip, you can also use keyboard shortcuts to adjust the opacity. Number 0 will revert it back to 100, 5 will set it to 50, 3 will make it 30, and so on. But this will not work if you have selected the brush tool, because the brush tool also has the opacity option in its option bar, and using the numbers shortcut for opacity will affect the opacity option of the brush tool. So if you look over here and I'm pressing 5 on the keyboard, the opacity of the brush is changing. So you need to be careful what tool is selected when you try changing the opacity using keyboard shortcuts. Next up, we will see how we can use gradient tool in layer mask. In our previous example, we used brush tool to make custom edits, and now we will see how gradient tool works in layer mask. Gradients are gradual changes of color or tint that sweeps over an image or a portion of an image. They can be used to add subtle color changes to an image, or they can be layered and blended to create interesting effects. So we are going to grab our gradient tool, which is located right over here, and you can also press G on your keyboard to select the gradient tool. Sometimes you may not see the gradient tool in the tools bar, and that is because the paint bucket tool will be selected. Then you can just right click on that, flyout menu will appear, and you can then select the gradient tool. Gradient tools can be used to draw different kinds of gradients. If you can see here right over the options bar, you've got linear gradient that will create just a linear gradient, or you can select radial gradient and it will create a circular gradient. Similarly, angle gradient will create like this, reflective gradient appears like this, and the last one is diamond gradient, which looks like this. The next thing is to adjust the opacity right over here at the options bar. Make sure your opacity is 100%, and just like the brush tool, if I press 5 on the keyboard, my opacity has changed to 50% versus the opacity of the layer. So whenever you have a tool selected like brush or gradient and it has opacity option in options bar, then pressing numbers to adjust opacity will affect the opacity in options bar only. So 0 resets back to 100. The next thing we need to decide is the type of gradient. We have linear, radial, angle, reflective and diamond gradients. We will select linear gradient for this example, and then we need to make sure we have correct setup for our gradient. Remember, black removes, white adds. So we need to select the gradient that is going to remove the edit gradually from one side to another in the layer mask. So click on the gradient over here, which will bring up the gradient editor, and you need to select the gradient black to white, which is right over here, black to white. After that, click OK. Now come here to layers palette and make sure you have your layer mask selected. Now let's go to the image and click and drag out a line, and the gradient will be placed along that line, and you can make it as large or as small depending amount of gradient that you want. Once you release, you will see on your layer mask black to white being applied with gradient. You can just reapply the gradient again to the mask if you didn't like the previous one. You can apply it either from top or from below. If you hold Shift key while dragging the gradient, you will get gradient on a straight line. You can see right here. Without Shift key, you can have different kinds of angle gradients. You can make gradient on any type of angle. Holding Shift locks the gradient and brush tool at 45 degrees. It is a complete straight line. Now it's 45 degrees, again a straight line, again 45 degrees. So you can either apply a perfect horizontal or vertical gradient, or you can apply the gradient at 45 degrees angle. We can also use gradient in layer mask without overwriting our previous selection. As you can see right here, the current gradient has overwritten our selection of the parrot. So let's undo that first, and pressing Ctrl plus Z or Command plus Z can undo your action. Now to apply a gradient without disturbing our previous selection, we need a gradient that is foreground to transparent gradient, which can be found in the gradient editor. Just go down to basics, and here it is written foreground to transparent. Or you can create your own foreground to transparent gradient. First select foreground to background or black to white. Now go to the white area and click on this opacity pointer and make the opacity from 100 to 0. And you can even drag this black pointer to see how much opacity you need, and you can save your new custom gradient so that you can use it in future. But foreground to transparent gradients are available by default in Photoshop. I'm just showing you how you can edit your gradient. After that, click OK. Now let's go back to our image and try applying a gradient again. I'm holding Shift to get a straight gradient, and you can see in the layer mask I have created a new gradient from black to white, and my previous selection is preserved as well. Also, using this type of gradient, we can apply multiple gradients to the single layer mask. Like if I want to make a gradient from here at 45 degrees angle, you can see in the layer mask, along with this gradient, I've got another gradient right here. I can make a gradient over here as well. I can bring down a gradient from top, from here as well. So if you use foreground to transparent gradient, you can apply as much gradient as you want in your layer mask. But the same is not possible with black to white or foreground to background. Now let's use this gradient on another image, and we are going to use this image for demonstration. So now we are going to go to adjustment layer and select Hue Saturation. We are going to change the color of the water by dragging the hue slider towards right. And you can see the whole image is affected. If I toggle the eye icon right here, this was the previous image and this is after the edit. So right now our layer mask is completely white, which means that it's applying the edit to the whole image. So we need to paint on black in areas that we don't want that edit, which is basically from the horizon up. For this we are going to use our gradient tool of black to white. So I'll go to gradient editor, and in basic I'll select black to white and click OK. Now we're going to click just above the horizon, and with holding my shift key I'm going to drag a straight line to the bottom. Once I let go, we can see in our layer mask we have gradient applied from black to white, and edit is being applied only in the bottom area of the image because in layer mask white shows and black removes. So now you can see we have changed the color of the water from green to blue without affecting any other part of the image. So that is how you can use the gradient tool with layer adjustment and layer mask. Now I'm going to show you how you can control local adjustment layers and how you can apply adjustment layers to your specific layers and not all of them. So let's open a couple of images. Now using my move tool or pressing B on the keyboard for selecting the move tool, I am going to bring this image of old car to the lake document by clicking the image and dragging it to that document without releasing the mouse button. When I am in the lake document, I will release the mouse button and I have brought the image right here. Now selecting the car layer, if I press Ctrl plus T or Command plus T, I can bring about the transform tool and I can align my image like so and press OK right here. Now let's add a black and white adjustment layer to the car layer from right down here. As soon as the black and white adjustment layer is applied, it is applied to the whole image. If we were to apply it only to the lake, we could just drag the black and white layer and bring it below the car layer, and our lake would only be black and white and the car would remain in color. But I want the black and white effect only for the car layer, and how can we do that? Let's just bring the adjustment layer to the top. Double click on the icon beside the layer mask, the properties panel will show up, and if you go down here there is an icon that says clip to layer mask. And if you click on this icon, the black and white adjustment layer will only be applied to the car layer. Or another way, if you select the black and white layer and right click on it and select the create clipping mask, the clipping mask will be applied. Or holding your Alt or Option on the keyboard, if you bring your mouse pointer between the two layers, your mouse pointer will change to the clipping icon, and if you click on the top layer, the black and white layer will be clipped to the layer below and other layers will be unaffected. So this way we can control our adjustment layers and apply them to particular layers only. And the clipping option will be available with any kind of layers. So this brings an end to a two-part video series for adjustment layer and layer masks. Both are very important Photoshop tools, and as much as you get used to it, your whole Photoshop experience will be a lot easier and you will also learn to work non-destructively. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something new, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks again for watching. I hope to see you back for some more. See you next time on Color Scholar.